The July sun rose slow, but relentless over the training base, baking the parade ground in heat and nerves. It was the first day for Bravo Company. Fresh recruits lined up in mismatched postures, eyes darting, boots too clean. The air buzzed with tension, sweat, and the unmistakable odor of fear masked in forced confidence. Among the crowd of nervous chatter and nervous glances stood Private First Class Mara Kincaid. She wasn't like the others. Not anymore. She stood still, arms straight, posture perfect, eyes forward, calm as if she had done this 1,000 times. Her uniform hung crisply on her lean frame, boots broken in but clean. But it wasn't her silence or discipline that made heads turn. It was the scars. Faint but unmistakable, they crawled up the left side of her neck, visible even under the cap's shadow. They extended down her left hand and wrist, a gnarled pattern of deep, old burns. Even the stiffest recruit sneaked a glance, eyes flicking quickly away when she turned slightly. Some looked with confusion, others with quiet curiosity. One or two with pity. And then there was recruit Dylan Mercer. Jesus, he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for the few recruits around him to hear. What did she do? Try to hug a grenade? The boy next to him chuckled, unsure. If he should. Mara didn't flinch. She didn't look his way, didn't shift or tense. She simply stood, statuesque, as the drill instructors approached, one step behind them. A senior-looking staff sergeant carried a clipboard. Dylan leaned slightly toward the recruit on his left. I thought this was boot camp, not a burn ward. The recruit didn't respond this time. Not because he didn't find it funny, but because of what happened next. As the instructors paced back and forth, inspecting the line staff. Sergeant Hill paused right in front of Mara. A tall, hardened man with a face like cracked stone. He didn't speak at first. Just looked her up and down. Private First Class Kincaid, he said finally. Yes, Staff Sergeant. You're early. Always, Staff Sergeant. A beat of silence. The other recruits felt it. A different kind of tension, like this. Wasn't just another new recruit getting sized up. Staff Sergeant Hill nodded, barely perceptibly. Good to see you again, he said. And then, as if forgetting the rest, moved down the line. Dylan blinked. Again? Another recruit near. Him raised an eyebrow. That wasn't how they usually greeted fresh meat. Mara remained motionless, her face unreadable. The morning brief began. A sharp-voiced instructor barked about expectations, failure rates, and how no one gave a damn where you came from, only where you were going. He talked about uniform standards, punishments, schedules, and pain. But Dylan wasn't listening. He was staring at the woman 3 places down the row, trying to figure her out. Bet she got sent here as a favor, he whispered to the guy next to him. One of those feel-good hero cases. Probably cried on TV or something. The recruit glanced at him and said, Shut up, man. Just drop it. Dylan narrowed his eyes. What? You scared of her? No, the recruit replied. I just don't think you get it. Training began immediately. Push-ups, sit-ups, runs. Standing in the sun for hours while instructors screamed inches from their faces. Most broke a little, shoulders slumped, eyes glazed over, legs trembling. But not Mara. She didn't flinch, didn't sweat the same. Even when one drill sergeant screamed directly in her face, she didn't blink. Not once. By midday, whispers about her had already begun. She was a firefighter, I think. Didn't she pull kids out of a burning building? No, man. I heard she got caught in an IED blast. Then how's she even walking? Every whisper added fuel to Dylan's frustration. He didn't like mysteries. He didn't like being ignored. And most of all, he didn't like how people were starting to look at her with respect and at him like some punk. During the lunch break, They sat under shade, backs to the wall, shoveling food into their mouths with plastic forks. Mara sat alone, calmly eating with perfect posture. Dallin approached her, tray in hand. He stood just a little too close, his voice just a little too loud. "So," he said, "you gonna tell us how you got cooked, or do we wait for story time?" Several recruits stopped eating. Mara didn't look up. "Come on, it's a fair question," he continued. "You walk around with half your skin melted and act like you're better than us. What's the story? Fall asleep with a lit cigarette?" Silence. Recruits stared at their trays, unsure what would happen next. Then, slowly, Mara lifted her eyes and met his. "There's a difference," she said flatly, "between being scarred and being soft." Dylan smirked. "Oh, so now you talk." She stood. He expected her to yell, shove him, crack, anything to give him some leverage. But she just looked at him, cold, calm, calculated. "If you survive something worth remembering," she said, quietly, "maybe someone will give you a nickname too." Then she walked past him without another word. The recruits at the tables shifted, watching her go. Dylan stood frozen. His mouth opened, then closed. His smirk was gone. He didn't understand yet, but he would. And the name Phoenix hadn't even been mentioned. Not yet. The air in the barracks was still and thick, stirred only by the whir of fans and the occasional clink of gear being adjusted or boots hitting the floor. It was late. Lights out had passed, but few recruits could sleep. Muscles ached from hours of drills, and the adrenaline still clung to their bloodstreams. Recruits whispered under their breath, trading stories and grumbling about the morning inspection. In the corner bunk, Private First Class Mara Kincaid sat cross-legged, cleaning her boots with slow, deliberate movements. She didn't talk. She never did unless she had to. Her face, illuminated by a small reading light, looked like it had been carved from stone. Not angry, not tired, just present. And once again, eyes drifted toward her scars. Recruits were trying to piece her together, like a puzzle with no box cover. She was too experienced, too calm. Most of them fumbled their rifles or forgot cadence under pressure. Mara? She breezed through the day like she had been born into it. Across the room, Dylan Mercer sat on the edge of his bunk, rewrapping a bandage around his blistered heel. He was still sore from the leadership drill, where Mara had calmly taken over after he botched every call. He hadn't forgotten the words she left him with. There's a difference between being scarred and being soft. The phrase echoed in his mind, taunting him. He could feel the shift happening. The same recruits who used to chuckle at his jabs were starting to avoid them. A few had even asked Mara for help on formations. It grated him. She didn't even try to be liked. She earned it. That night, Dylan tried again. Quieter, more calculated. As Mara cleaned her gear in silence, he called out, "Hey, Phoenix. You don't like the nickname?" She paused briefly, then resumed polishing her boots without looking up. Another recruit, Torres, glanced up from his bunk. "Phoenix?" he asked. Dylan smirked, sensing an opening. "Yeah, that's what they call her." Heard it from one of the instructors. Burned up, came back to life. You know, like the myth. "Where'd you hear that?" Torres asked, interested now. Dylan shrugged. "Around, probably her firefighter story. Dragged someone out of a bonfire or something." There was a silence, but not an admiring one. A tense one. Mara closed her kit, set her boots down, and stood. She faced Dylan, not angry, not defensive, just still. The room went quiet again. "I earned that Callsign," she said evenly. Her voice didn't rise, but the weight of her words sucked the air out of the barracks. "I didn't give it to myself, and it wasn't because of scars." She walked to her bunk and climbed in. Torres turned toward Dylan and mouthed, "What's her story?" Dylan shrugged, but his curiosity had begun to fester into something more than petty mockery. Something closer to obsession. The next day, training resumed before dawn. 5-mile run. Weapon disassembly. Tactical relay drills under punishing heat. Mara performed like clockwork, precise, fast, and quietly dominant. Instructors noticed. Sergeant Brooks, the gruffest of the drill team, paused during an obstacle drill and gestured toward Mara. "Why do you think she's moving like that?" He shouted at a struggling group of recruits. Dylan, panting in the back of the group, muttered, "Because she's a damn robot?" Brooks whirled on him. "She's moving like someone who doesn't want to bury the person next to her." He barked. "You move like someone who's still looking for his damn reflection in a mirror." A few recruits exchanged looks. That wasn't a typical line. It sounded personal. Later that evening, the whispers became questions. "She doesn't just act like she's done this before. She moves like someone who's been there." "Where?" "I don't know. War. A fire zone? Maybe both." That night, as they stood in line for chow, Dylan found himself just behind Mara. He stared at the back of her neck, the thickened, crisscrossed skin, ugly to some, proof of something terrible to others. "Did it hurt?" he asked suddenly. Mara didn't turn around. "Yes." He hesitated. "Then why didn't you quit?" "I would have." She looked at him over her shoulder, eyes sharp but not cruel. "Because other people didn't get to." She stepped forward in the line. Dylan stood there for a second longer, suddenly unsure of what he was chasing. Was he trying to humiliate her? Or understand her? That night, Torres shared something he overheard. "She saved 5 kids from a burning building," he said, "before she joined." "No way," another recruit said. "I swear." One of the corporals mentioned it. Sighed. She was already a hero when she enlisted. Didn't even have to come here. She chose it. Dylan sat on his bunk, silent. He had never saved anyone, never led anyone, never even stood out, except when he was making noise. Mara was becoming more than a mystery now. She was a mirror, one he hated looking into. Late that night, as the barracks finally settled, Dylan rolled over in bed, eyes wide open. The fans buzzed. Somewhere across the room, someone snored. But all he could hear was Mara's voice again. "There's a difference between being scarred and being soft." He didn't want to admit it yet, not even to himself. But somewhere deep down, he was starting to understand which one he was. And it had nothing to do with skin. Asterisk. Years before the barracks, before the uniform, and the Callsign Phoenix, Mara Kincaid stood in soot-covered boots outside a burning orphanage in Wichita Falls, Texas. She wasn't in combat then. She wore turnout gear, not camouflage. But the fire was just as real, and the choices just as deadly. It had started as a routine call. Smoke reported on the east side. Possible gas leak. She and her crew rolled out without urgency. But when they turned the corner and saw the old orphanage, spewing black clouds into the morning sky, Mara's gut twisted. Something was wrong. Inside, screaming. Not adult voices, children. Without waiting for full perimeter checks or a secondary team, Mara snapped on her mask and kicked in the front door. Her captain barked orders behind her, but she was already gone. The heat inside was unbearable. Walls crackling, ceilings moaning. Visibility was 0. She moved low, finding her first child near the stairs. A boy no older than 6, eyes wide with smoke terror. She scooped him up and ran him back. To the door. She went back in. A firefighter's rule is simple. Never go back in alone. Wait for backup. Wait for visibility. Wait. Mara didn't wait. By the time backup arrived, she had brought out 4 children, coughing, crying, but alive. Her gear was scorched, her lungs burned. But there was one child unaccounted for, a toddler girl, last. Seen in the upstairs playroom, Mara didn't hesitate. That final run nearly killed her. The second floor had already begun to collapse. The hallway was a death trap, flames licking the edges of the floorboards like hungry tongues. But Mara crawled through, finding the girl in the corner of a smoke-filled room, clutching a melted plastic toy and crying quietly. She picked her up, cradled her against her chest, and turned to leave. The hallway exploded. A support beam collapsed just behind her, sending burning debris across her back and shoulder. Her helmet was knocked off. Fire licked her exposed skin, but she kept moving. The pain was instant. Blistering, tearing pain as her uniform fused to her skin in places. When she finally stumbled out, she didn't collapse. She handed the toddler off to the EMTs, nodded once to her captain, and fell to her knees. That image, a firefighter on fire, still walking, was captured on a bystander's phone. The clip went viral, but Mara refused interviews. She stayed, quiet in the hospital, even when the governor called. She didn't want fame. She wanted the girl to live. That was enough. The burns on her shoulder, neck, and arm were third degree. Recovery was brutal. Skin grafts, rehab, pain management. The doctors said she'd never return to active duty. Retire, they told her. Live your life. You've done more than enough. She nodded, polite. But inside, something else burned. Something the fire didn't kill. It started one night during her rehab. A visiting veteran had stopped by the center to deliver care packages. He was in uniform, and she asked him casually, "Army?" "Marines," he answered. "2 tours. Afghanistan." He noticed the scars on her arms and nodded. "You look like you've already done your tour." She smiled. "I ran into a different kind of hell." He studied her a moment, then asked, "You ever think about enlisting?" She laughed. "You think they'd want me like this?" The Marine didn't smile. "You walked through fire for strangers. I'd trust you next to me. In a fight." Those words stayed with her. 3 months later, she walked into a recruitment office with her medical discharge papers from the fire department and a quiet request, "I want in." The recruiters were skeptical. "You've already served your community," one said. "You don't have to prove anything." "I'm not trying to prove something," she replied. "I'm trying to protect something." With medical waivers, background checks, and a long conversation with a colonel who reviewed her viral video personally, Mara Kincaid was accepted into the U.S. Army. Basic training wasn't easy, not even close. She was older than most recruits, her skin still sensitive, her lungs not as strong. But she never complained, never backed down. Every obstacle she faced reminded her of the fire. Blisters from rucking? She'd already crawled through glass. Bruises from hand-to-hand combat? She dragged children through collapsing walls, yelling. Instructors? She'd heard mothers scream for their babies inside burning buildings. They couldn't break her, because she'd already been broken and rebuilt by fire. The nickname Phoenix came from another trainee, muttered half in awe and half in curiosity. "She's like ... reborn or something." It stuck, but it wasn't until Mara deployed to Afghanistan that the name earned its full weight. Her unit was ambushed during a routine convoy. The lead Humvee was hit, bursting into flames. Rounds cracked. Through the air as chaos erupted. Smoke and screams filled the desert. Everyone took cover, except Mara. She charged through the gunfire toward the burning vehicle. No mask. No turnout gear. Just instinct. She pulled one man out, then another. She went back for the third. A photo surfaced days later. Mara, singed and bloodied, dragging a soldier out of the fire, lips clenched in pain, eyes locked forward. Phoenix had risen again, and when she returned stateside and entered advanced training, her story was passed in hushed reverence. Not official, not on paper, but soldier to soldier. In the barracks at Basic, the scars on her neck told only part of the story. And recruits like Dylan? They had no idea they were training beside a woman who had survived hell twice and walked back into it willingly. But they were about to find out. Asterisk. The following week brought a shift in everything: tone, tension, and terrain. The recruits of Bravo Company were moved to the live fire training range, a stretch of dirt, gravel, and makeshift buildings simulating urban warfare. It was where the instructors separated soldiers from spectators. Nerves ran high. Mistakes here weren't just embarrassing, they could be dangerous. Recruits assembled in 2 squads, tasked with executing a building breach under simulated fire. Blank rounds, timed pyrotechnics, and flashbangs would replicate battlefield chaos. Each squad was led by a rotating recruit leader. Dylan Mercer got the first command rotation. He was eager to prove himself. Maybe too eager. "All right, listen up," Dylan barked to his team. "We enter fast, we clear left to right, stack tight. No hesitation." Mara Kincaid, positioned near the rear of the stack, said nothing. Her face was unreadable, eyes fixed on the building ahead, like she could already see through its walls. Torres whispered under his breath, "We should let her lead this one." "Shut up," Dylan muttered. "I've got it." The whistle blew. Smoke poured from the windows, and a series of loud bangs echoed through the compound. Dylan led the charge, fast, aggressive, too wide at the corner. He breached incorrectly. Bettine staggered through the threshold like a busted water pipe. Inside, a simulated IED detonated. Lights flashed red. Half the squad was dead. The instructors halted the exercise immediately. "Stop," barked Staff Sergeant Brooks. That was a goddamn disaster. Dylan stood in the middle of the fake blood pool, breathing hard, ears ringing from the noise, not from the IED, but from his pride detonating in real time. Brooks turned to Mara. "Kincaid, you're up. Run it again. Lead the second squad." Mara nodded once. No hesitation. She reorganized the team in under 30 seconds. Quick, clear hand signals. A glance for timing. Her voice low but confident. Stack tight. Move with purpose. First man checks the corner. Second clears the opposite. Third checks high. "I'm last in." The whistle blew again. They entered. This time, it looked like choreography. Swift, precise, deliberate. Every room cleared in under 10 seconds. No confusion. No missteps. The final door opened. Simulated hostage secured. All clear. "Holy shit," Torres whispered. Stunned. Even the instructors stood quietly, watching as Mara moved through the house like she'd lived a lifetime in war zones. At the end of the drill, Sergeant Brooks clapped. "Once. That," he barked, "is how you survive. And that is why she's called Phoenix." Dylan's face flushed. There it was. Out in the open now. Her Callsign. Phoenix earned her name pulling soldiers from real fires. Brooks continued. Not stories. Not speculation. Combat. Afghanistan. First Cav, Silver Star. Silence. Heavy. Reverent. Dylan swallowed hard. He felt small. No, exposed. That night in the barracks, no one mocked her. They didn't need to whisper anymore. The story had spilled into daylight. Not just a myth, but truth straight from the mouth of a battle-hardened staff sergeant. "Silver Star?" Torres said quietly. "That's not just given. You earn that under fire. Literally." Mara sat on her bunk, cleaning her rifle with the same quiet focus. She wasn't basking in praise. She wasn't bragging. She hadn't said a word. Dylan walked over, slower than usual. His face wasn't smug. It was uncertain. "Hey," he said, standing just beside her rack. She paused but didn't look up. "I didn't know," he added. Mara didn't flinch. "You didn't ask," Dylan shifted. "I made assumptions. You were quiet. And the scars. I just thought." She finally met his eyes. "You thought pain makes people weak," she said softly. "But it doesn't. It makes them aware. Careful, strategic." Dylan opened his mouth to respond, but she kept going. "You wanted to lead today. That's good. Leaders should step forward. But leading means more than barking orders and charging through a door. It means knowing when not to." She handed him her cleaning rag. "You'll figure it out." Dylan took it, awkwardly. "Thanks," he said, unsure if he deserved it. "You're welcome," she said, turning back to her weapon. Later that night, the recruits sat outside under the stars after lights out. The instructors had allowed it, something about the heat wave and morale. Mara sat on a cinder block, sipping from her canteen. A few others gathered around her, cautiously respectful. "What's it like?" Torres finally asked. "Combat?" Mara didn't answer right away. She stared up at the stars. "It's loud," she said, "and quiet at the same time." Torres frowned. "That doesn't make sense." She looked at him. "It will." Another recruit asked, "Were you scared?" "Yes," she said, "every time." "Then how'd you keep going?" Mara took a breath, because someone had to. Simple. Honest. Dylan sat farther back in the circle, listening. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Something was changing in him, something fundamental. And in the quiet, he realized Mara's scars weren't just reminders of what she'd survived. They were warnings of what it cost to freeze, to fail, to falter. She wasn't a mystery anymore. She was a standard. Asterisk. Dawn was bruising the sky with shades of orange and steel when the ruck march began. 20 miles. Full packs. No complaints. Bravo. Company moved like shadows across the dirt trail, their boots pounding rhythm into the silence. Each recruit wore exhaustion like a second skin, but they pushed forward. Every mile stripped away ego, peeled back bravado, and left only grit. Mara Kincaid, Callsign Phoenix, was at the front. As always, Dylan Mercer was right behind her. No longer out of rivalry. Now, out of something closer to respect. Each mile marker they passed reminded Dylan of who he used to be just weeks ago. Loud, arrogant, insecure. But something had changed in him. Not because of punishments or drills. Because of Mara. She never told him to change. She just showed him a better way to stand, better way to fall, and rise again. By mile 8, the sun had fully claimed the sky. Heat rippled off the earth like breath from an open oven. Sweat soaked through uniforms. Shoulders sagged. Packs grew heavier. A recruit named Chung stumbled beside Torres, his steps faltering. Dylan saw it happening. Before Chung hit the dirt, Dylan dropped his own pace and steadied him. Slipped a hand under the guy's pack strap and said, "You're not falling out. Not today." Mara glanced back just once and nodded silently. He didn't need praise. He just needed to keep going. That was something Mara had taught him too. By mile 15, they reached the ridge. Jagged rocks. Steep incline. One wrong step could snap an ankle or shred a knee. Slow and steady. Sergeant Brooks barked, but speed wasn't the issue. Heart was. One by one, recruits gritted their teeth and climbed. Mara didn't slow. She moved like the mountain was familiar, like pain was just a checkpoint. Dylan struggled halfway up. Not physically. Mentally. His legs shook from dehydration. His shoulders screamed. But more than that, doubt crept in. You're not like her. You'll never be like her. Then he saw something that shocked him more than exhaustion. Mara faltered. Her left foot slipped. Just slightly. But it happened. For a single heartbeat, she was human, not invincible. And that's when Dylan realized she didn't rise because she was unbreakable. She rose because she'd been broken, and climbed anyway. At mile 20. They reached the finish. Mara dropped her pack, face flushed and glistening with sweat. Her chest rose and fell, but her posture didn't droop. She stood as if the weight still clung to her back. Dylan staggered in after her, knees weak, lungs burning. But he made it. One by one, the company gathered. Some collapsed. Others cheered. Torres leaned against a log and said, "That woman is forged from steel and bad decisions." Mara just smirked. "Mostly fire," she said. Later that night, after showers and chow, the recruits sat under a blood-orange sunset. No one talked about scores or rankings. Just stories, laughter, real camaraderie. Dylan found himself sitting next to Mara. Not planned, not forced. It just felt natural now. "You slipped." "Back there," he said casually. She nodded. "Yeah. You ever fall completely?" Mara looked down at her hands. "Calloused, scarred, capable. More times than I can count," she said. "The trick isn't avoiding the fall. It's learning how to land." He nodded, silent for a moment. Then, "You ever think about quitting?" "Every day," she admitted. "Especially when it would have been easier." He studied her face. "You're not what I expected." "I'm not what I expected either," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. That night, the base sirens wailed at 2 a.m. Not a drill. Everyone leapt from bunks, half-dressed, boots unlaced, scrambling. A nearby range facility had caught fire. A supply trailer had exploded. Flames licked the edge of the tree line. Panic swept the edges of camp like wind through dry grass. Recruits stood in loose formation, blinking away sleep, adrenaline surging. Then a voice yelled, "Where's Phoenix?" Mara was already gone. She'd seen the fire through the barracks window. Something in her ignited. Not fear, not memory. Purpose. She sprinted toward the blaze without orders, grabbing a fire blanket and extinguisher on the way. By the time the emergency crews arrived, she'd pulled a maintenance sergeant from the smoke, wrapped him in the blanket, and carried him 40 yards to safety. Again, like clockwork, like instinct. The next morning, recruits woke to a briefing. The fires. Out. No fatalities. Thanks to quick response from the fire team. And Private First Class Mara Kincaid. Applause erupted. For the first time, Mara didn't disappear into the background. She stood tall, not smiling, but present. The scars on her arms caught the light. This time, no one looked away. Dylan clapped the loudest. Because now he understood. Wasn't just a recruit, not just a survivor. She was a compass. The kind of soldier who didn't walk away from the flame. She walked through it. Asterisk. 3 weeks from graduation, Bravo Company was deep into Phase 3 combat simulations, the final proving ground. Confidence had replaced fear in most faces, but the nerves never really disappeared. Night exercises, live drills, squad leader, rotations, and daily ruck march pushed them to their limits. But more than exhaustion or pressure, it was expectation that loomed. And for Mara Phoenix Kincaid, expectation was the heaviest burden of all. She never asked to be admired. But now, eyes followed her. Even instructors leaned in when she spoke. Recruits mimicked her posture, her decision-making, her silence. She was no longer just a fellow trainee. She was the bar. And being the bar, never slipping. But she was slipping, quietly. Inside. It began with the dreams again. The fire, not from the orphanage, but from Afghanistan. The smell of burning fuel. The crack of gunfire. The screams from inside the Humvee. The soldier she couldn't reach in time. Private Allen, 19, new to the unit, always grinning. His voice haunted her at night. You got 2 out, Phoenix. Why not 3? She'd wake up with her fists clenched, jaw tight, shirt soaked through with sweat, but she told no one. She couldn't. Not this late into training. Not when recruits half her age looked at her like a war god. Then came the CQB compound drill, close quarters battle. Each squad had to infiltrate a 2-story mock structure, clear hostiles, secure an objective, and exfil in under 7 minutes. Smoke grenades, flashbangs, simulated IEDs, all part of the game. Mara was assigned as team lead this time. The squad moved like gears in a clock. Efficient, tight, fluid. But something went wrong in the stairwell. A flashbang misfired. Loud. Too loud. The sound wasn't simulated enough. It hit her like a hammer. Her ears rang violently, the smoke curling just right to mimic that desert fire in Kandahar. Her knees buckled. Suddenly, she wasn't in the drill house anymore. She was back in the blaze. Allen screaming, the steel of the Humvee door too hot to touch. Kincaid, you good? Torres yelled. She blinked hard. Reality snapped back. She clenched her rifle and nodded. I'm good. Move. But the delay cost them points. Time expired before they reached the final room. That night, she stayed behind while others went to chow. Dylan lingered outside the barracks, debating. She hadn't spoken. Much lately, shorter answers, distant stares. He noticed. They all did. But nobody knew what to say. He finally stepped inside. Mara sat on her bunk, cleaning her weapon for the 3rd time that day. Ritual. Routine. Refuge. You froze today. Dylan said. She didn't respond. You've never done that before. Still silence. Ben? Yeah, I did. It was the first time she admitted it. Dylan sat on the bunk across from hers. You want to talk about it? No, she said, then added. But I probably should. So she told him about the Humvee, the soldier she couldn't reach, the way the flames licked his uniform, how her boots melted to the sand, how she screamed at her own hands to move faster, and how they didn't. He was still alive when I got there, she said softly. And I hesitated. Dylan shook his head. You didn't fail him. I did, she whispered. 1 second of doubt. That's all it takes. One moment where you think you've already done enough. She looked at him then, not as Phoenix, not as the legend, but as Mara. I don't get to make that mistake again. The next day, the drill instructors announced a final exercise. Operation Grey Towen, a full-scale mock deployment. Recruits would be divided into 2 platoons. Objectives, rotations, real-time combat simulations. Mara was named acting platoon sergeant. Dylan was her squad lead. She didn't smile. She just nodded. But later that night, alone, she opened a small folded piece of paper tucked inside her gear bag. It was a letter from the mother of Private Allen. She had sent it months ago, but Mara kept it folded, unread, afraid of what it might say. But now, she unfolded it. Dear Mara, I've heard stories about what happened, what you did for the others. They told me you went back into fire. Again, and again, and again. I want you to know, I don't blame you. Allen made his choice. 2. He joined for people like you, brave people. People who keep going even when it burns. You didn't fail him. You honored him. You still do. Thank you. Elizabeth Allen. Mara closed her eyes, tears silent on her cheek. She folded the letter again, carefully, reverently, and tucked it into her breast pocket, over her heart. She didn't sleep that night. She didn't need to, because now she wasn't running from the fire anymore. She was walking toward it again, but this time, Not alone. Operation Grey Talon started at dawn. Simulated deployment orders were handed out in sealed envelopes. Platoon leaders briefed the mission under the rising sun while instructors in full gear played the role of embedded command. Mara, Phoenix. Kincaid stood in front of her squad, her face unreadable. But something in her posture had changed. No longer just calm. Now, rooted. Steady as bedrock. Dylan Mercer, now a confident squad leader, watched her closely. Everyone did. Since the stairwell incident, her story had passed from whispered myth to spoken truth. She wasn't just a battle-worn survivor anymore. She was human, fallible, fierce, and somehow that made her more respected than ever. Even her silences carried weight now. The mission was layered. Bravo Company would perform a dusk assault on a simulated enemy compound, complete with OPFOR, opposing force, units played by seasoned instructors. Objectives included hostage extraction, equipment recovery, and establishing a secure forward base. Failure meant recycled drills. Success meant honor. And for many, closure. They moved out by noon. For hours, the platoon hiked through wooded terrain, navigating by compass and map. There were no GPS units. Only instinct and coordination. Mara led from the front, calling short halts, scanning tree lines, checking rear security. Her orders were crisp, efficient, and always calm. You good? Dylan asked her during a break, handing over his last granola bar. She nodded. Better than yesterday? Letter helped? She glanced sideways at him, a rare smile tugging at her lips. Yeah, she said. He would have liked this mission. At 1700 hours, they reached Phase 1, reconnaissance and forward observation. Torres and another recruit took up sniper spotting, positions on a ridge overlooking the mock village. Inside the compound, instructors wearing fake turbans and replica rifles walked casually, laughing, playing roles, but doing it well. The smell of sulfur and smoke grenades lingered in the air, a twisted realism that settled in the lungs like truth. We wait until 1900, Mara said. Then we breach east side, through the blind spot. Dylan glanced at the map. That's tight, zero margin. She looked at him. That's the point. He didn't argue. At 1900, the assault began. Flashbangs were deployed first, the simulated shock covering the rapid entry. The squad moved as one, a precision dance of years of strategy compressed into weeks of training. Dylan breached the second room and cleared left. Torres kicked in the third door and dragged a mock hostage to cover. Everything was running smooth. Too smooth. Until the instructor playing OPFOR shouted, IED, left side, and slammed a red button on the wall. A thunderous boom echoed through the compound. Fake debris exploded across the courtyard. Smoke swallowed the exit route, and Mara's squad was cut off. Shift to fallback plan, Charlie. She yelled. But over the comms, another voice came through. An instructor from Overwatch. Your primary evac path is now compromised. You must secure and clear the west stairwell for alternate extraction. Dylan glanced down the hall. The west stairwell. The same setup from that flashbang simulation, where Mara had frozen. Only this time, no blanks. No training wheels. Just pressure, Phoenix? He said. Mara's eyes locked on the stairwell like it was a memory. Reanimated. But she didn't freeze. She exhaled, calmly. Then moved forward. The squad followed without hesitation. Mara led them. Down the stairs, sweeping corners like a machine, but with more than precision, with presence. The smoke thickened. Visibility dropped. Halfway down, another flashbang detonated, this one deliberate. Dylan blinked against the white light, staggered. Mara dropped low, hand on his shoulder. Eyes up, Mercer. Stay with me? He nodded, regaining his footing. They hit the lower level. Two instructors in Op-4 gear hopped around the corner, simulating a final ambush. Dylan and Mara fired 2 blanks each. Clean hits. Hostile down. The ref instructor called clear. They reached the evac zone. Mission complete. As the sun dipped behind the hills and the debrief began, recruits sat on crates in the staging area, soaked in sweat and adrenaline. Staff Sergeant Brooks stood in front of them. "I've been training boots for 18 years, he began. "I've seen hotshots. I've seen quitters. And every once in a while, I see someone who leads from the front, not because they want to be seen, but because they can't stomach the thought of anyone else taking the hit." He looked at Mara. "Kincaid is one of those people." He let the words settle. "She's not just called Phoenix because she survived fire," Brooks continued. "She's called Phoenix because she chooses to walk through it, over and over, for the sake of others. That's a leader. That's a soldier." The recruits erupted in applause. Mara didn't flinch, but Dylan saw it. The tiniest twitch in her jaw. Emotion. Pride. And maybe, finally, peace. That night, the barracks were quiet again. No drills, no punishment. Just the hum of fans and soft conversations. Dylan walked past her bunk. She was sitting with the folded letter in her lap, still unopened again. He paused. "You ever going to read it again?" "I don't need to," she said softly. "It's already written in me." Then, after a long pause, she added, "Tomorrow's the final review." Dylan grinned. "Then tomorrow, we finish what we started." Mara nodded. "Together." Graduation day? The sun rose slowly over the training grounds, casting long shadows across the parade field. Rows of bleachers filled with families, friends, and proud strangers who had come to see their sons and daughters, sisters and brothers complete one of the toughest journeys of their lives. Bravo Company stood at attention. Crisp uniforms, polished boots, chins high, but for one recruit, the weight of the moment ran deeper than ceremony. Mara Phoenix Kincaid stood in the front row, not because she wanted to, because she earned it. Weeks of combat simulations, night marches, team drills, and silent leadership had built not just muscle, but a mythos around her. She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy. She was unshakable. But today, even she felt it, that strange pressure in her chest. A mixture of pride and something harder to describe. Across the field, Dylan Mercer scanned the crowd, heart pounding. He'd invited no one. He didn't think anyone would come. But now, standing beside Mara, in full uniform, he realized he didn't need anyone in the stands. Because the people who mattered were right here, in formation beside him. He glanced at her, and for once, Mara wasn't stone-faced. Her eyes traced the horizon, calm, centered. "I ever tell you I almost didn't come here?" She whispered. "No." Dylan replied. "I was afraid they'd see the scars," she said. "Not just the ones on my arms." He didn't answer right away. Then, "That's the first thing I saw. And it's what made me respect you the most." She blinked once. The faintest breath of a smile touched her lips. The graduation began. Commanders gave their speeches. Drill instructors barked out names as the proudest recruits marched across the stage to collect their certificates. When Mara's name was called, Private First Class Mara Kincaid, Callsign, Phoenix. The applause was louder than most. Even the instructors clapped. Even Sergeant Brooks stood, a little taller. But something unexpected happened when she stepped up to receive her award. Man stood from the back row of the bleachers. Gray hair. Veteran cap. Strong posture despite age. Mara saw him and froze. Dylan noticed. "Who is that?" He whispered. She swallowed hard. "My father," she said. The crowd blurred into background as Mara slowly approached the stage. The man, Colonel Edward Kincaid, retired, stood quietly at attention. He hadn't been at her commissioning. He hadn't written back after her discharge. They'd parted years ago, right after her first deployment, on a bitter note, with more silence than words. But now, here he was waiting. She took her award, turned and locked eyes with him. Neither saluted, neither spoke, but his lips moved, just enough for her to read them. You walked through fire. Her throat tightened. She nodded. So did he. That was enough. Later that day, back at the barracks, most recruits packed up their things in silence. Laughter echoed here and there. Some tears, a few final photos. It felt like the end of something sacred and the beginning of something even more uncertain. Dylan sat on his bunk, writing in a leather journal. When Mara walked in, he looked up. Figured you'd already vanished, he said. I don't vanish, she replied. I leave. When I'm ready. She tossed something at him. It was a small patch, a custom one, a red and black emblem of a phoenix rising from ash. Dylan turned it over. No way. I can't wear this. You can now, she said. You earned it. He stared at her. You're staying in? She nodded. Double quotes, special operations track, she said. Advanced school next. Fire team lead. He raised a brow. You? Yeah, she said. They offered me a team. I said no. He blinked. Wait, you turned down command? She smirked. Not the right team yet. He understood what she meant. That evening, before she left, Dylan walked her to the gate. Sunset burned across the sky. Gold, red, deep violet. You're not the same guy who mocked me the first day, she said quietly. You're not the same woman who pretended scars made her untouchable, he replied. They both laughed. She looked at him for a long moment. You're going to be a hell of a soldier, Mercer. He nodded. You already are. He said. Then, without hesitation, he added, I'll see you out there someday, Phoenix. Her smile was quiet, confident. You will. She turned, and just like that, she walked away from the base, the barracks, the field. Into the fire again. But this time, the flame followed her. Not to destroy, but to light the way. For every recruit who ever felt broken. For every soldier who doubted themselves. For every scarred fighter who thought they had to hide. Mara Kincaid didn't burn and vanish. She burned and rose. Again. And again. Because some call signs aren't just earned. They're lived. The end.